Welcome to the Beau Show. I'm interviewing Joe Kent today. He's running in the 3rd Congressional District in the state of Washington. Joe, thanks for being here today on the Beau Show.
Thanks for having me on.
Joe, we talked a little bit just before cameras started rolling about why you're running. Can you give me just from the heart why you decided to put your hat in the ring?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had the honor of serving this country for a little bit over 20 years in the military and special operations. Did 11 combat deployments. You know, in that time, I saw the best and the worst of this country. The best is young men and young women coming from all walks of life, all races, all creeds to fight for this country. The worst that I saw was our permanent ruling class putting us at war and at risk for no gain to this country. So our establishment was really quick to send us to go fight wars of regime change and didn't care about the blood and treasure that we were spending overseas. And that was until President Trump came on the scene. So Trump came on the scene and he punched right through the neoconservative ideology, and then he let us go decisively fight and win against our enemies, but without getting us in any new conflicts. And this really personally hit home for me about 2 years ago. My wife, Shannon Kent, who was also in the military, also a special operator, was killed fighting ISIS in Syria. She was killed about a month after Trump tried to get our troops out the first time. And then we all saw what happened. Secretary of Defense Mattis and many other unelected bureaucrats turned against Trump to leave our troops in Syria, where they remain to this day. So had the orders of the commander-in-chief been followed, had the orders of President Trump been followed, my wife would still be alive. So despite all the grief that I was going through, I started speaking out publicly in defense of President Trump's America First policies, because with my experience fighting those wars on the ground, I knew that he had finally gotten it right. I'd intended to go back and work in a second Trump administration, and then we all saw what happened in 2020. Big tech, the mainstream media, unelected bureaucrats stole the election from us, and then we were told that, hey, if we even questioned that, we'd be labeled as terrorists or insurrectionists. Antifa burned the cities, burned my hometown of Portland, marched in the district where I live, and then the woman that I counted on to actually defend us and stand tall turned on us and voted for the impeachment of President Trump. So for me, I knew I had to stand up and start fighting back. I was blessed with 2 young sons who lost their mother when they were very young, and I'm going to have to explain to them that this is the country that she gave her life for. And right now, the condition we're in, I can't do that. So I want to go to Washington, D.C. to push back against everything the left is trying to do.
Excellent explanation. And Joe, I'm sorry for your loss, and for those sons that have to grow up without a mom. I know that's got to be tough, but both of you have served honorably. You touched a bit on foreign policy and why you think President Trump got it right. What was wrong for so long? Was it nation building? What was the wrong strategy that you saw firsthand?
Nation building, and then really just hubris. So we had the conservatives who thought that after 9/11 we needed to go remake the Middle East in our image, and we could do that through force. So we initially went over to Afghanistan for the right reasons. We had to chase and pursue Al-Qaeda and take them out. But once bin Laden crossed the border into Pakistan, where he remained for many years, we stopped, we turned around, and we said, hey, we're going to focus on building a nation in Afghanistan. And then about a year later, we were beating the war drum to go topple Saddam based on lies to go do more nation building. And from there were so many political operatives in the permanent ruling class from the Republican side and the Democrat side, like Joe Biden. He was a Democrat, but he was for the war. Right. And so now we have this culture in D.C. that is deeply ingrained in these ideas of regime change. Trump came in as an outsider and was free from all that and was able to objectively say, we've gotten nothing out of this and we need to get out.
So strategically speaking, then, Trump was more of a precision type person as opposed to let's just go in and just try to nation build. Do you think the Middle East, especially I know it's what's going on in Israel and Palestine, is very a difficult situation, but what makes it winnable? What makes the Middle East winnable in terms of they're not like us? They don't know independence like we have, and thank God we've had July 4th and what happened 245 years ago. Will they ever come around to understanding our way of life and embracing it, do you think?
I think that's entirely up to them, and if they do, that's going to be on them. Really, the best thing that we can do with the Middle East is we can have a strong U.S. economy where we don't need to purchase oil from them, and we have no real strategic interest. We don't need to muddle in their affairs. Let them handle their own affairs. Occasionally, we need to partner with people, great allies like the state of Israel, to go take out terrorists, and terrorists who want to hurt Americans, either at home or abroad. Those are our limited national security objectives. If we start extending ourselves and trying to remake nations in our image because we think we're smarter or we know better, we will find ourselves in quagmire after quagmire and will overall make our nation more weak.
Excellent point. I want to talk a bit about the military because you have so much experience in it. We've seen a lot of wokeism infecting our military while China seems to be ramped up and ready to go. Why is that happening?
Well, so the critical race theory and the whole wokeness, what the Biden administration is doing is they want to get total control of as many institutions as they can. Critical race theory is their mechanism for doing that. CRT does two things. It really turns people against each other to keep them divided and not realizing what's going on with the Biden administration and all the horrible policies they're putting into place. But it also gives people a good litmus test. It lets the Biden administration know who they can count on. And so with the military, they went in, they had Secretary of Defense Austin come in day one and say, hey, our number one issue is extremism. We have to have a stand down. We have to install political commissars. And so all the subordinate commanders underneath him who want to continue their career, they said, hey, I need to go ahead and genuflect at the altar of woke, start virtue signaling about all these things that don't really matter so that the administration knows that I am loyal to them. And that's why we're seeing critical race theory being weaponized right now. We're also seeing it being weaponized against what's going on with the audits. When the commander of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Milley, was talking about critical race theory on the floor, he said, hey, on the floor of Congress, he said, hey, I want to get to the bottom of white rage. I want to understand why white rage led people to attack this building. So he's doubling and tripling down on the insurrection narrative, because the insurrection narrative allows the Biden administration to deflect from the illegitimacy of their administration and to deflect from what's going on the floor in Maricopa County. The audits are going to happen in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, the list goes on. That's how they're deflecting from their illegitimacy.
A little bit of bait and switch, perhaps. Yep. I want to talk about patriotism, too. You know, patriotism is an important concept to me. You don't know this about me, but I created a song in 2012 called Blessed, and really it was a nonpartisan song, but it was really more about what I felt was a waning patriotism in this country, especially the younger generation. Why is it, especially this past July 4th, which we just were blessed enough to have another one after 245 years, where we saw people like Cori Bush dividing the country, the media dividing the country, talking about how it's embarrassing that we were built on unsavory principles. Why is the left using this narrative on what should be a unifying day to celebrate people like yourself who put their lives on the line, and your late wife? Why is this happening? Why are Democrats taking that narrative?
It's really clear that the Democrats, they want complete and total control. And if you want complete and total control, you have to attack the thing that stands in its way. And that's liberty and freedom, really, at the core of it. It's also the family. It's also faith. That's why the Democrats and the far left are attacking all of that so heavily. So you have to take away our sense of patriotism, because our sense of patriotism is rooted in God, it's rooted in families, and it's rooted in being really independent. And we stand in direct contrast to an authoritarian government. So if you want to install an authoritarian government and you want more control in people's lives, you have to attack the ideology of family, faith, and freedom. And there's nothing that has family, faith, and freedom more ingrained in it than our Constitution and the history of our country. That's why they're attacking our history.
It's a good point. And, you know, I think it was the New York Times, their article had said something about to see a flag in the back of a truck would be indicative of what political party you were part of, which is sad.
It's crazy.
Why couldn't a Democrat do that? What would be wrong with that?
You would think,
you know?
Right.
So you're one of the reasons also that's motivated you to run is Jamie Herrera Butler, who you would be running against, voted to impeach the president.
That's right.
You obviously would not have voted that way.
Absolutely not, no.
And so, in your estimation, President Trump did nothing to create the insurrection. You've spoken a lot about some of the great things President Trump has done. What are some of the things you think that the president has done that you think, in an America First way, were the most positive things for this country we saw in the past 4 years?
The biggest thing that President Trump did was he tried to get us out of our endless wars overseas, while at the same time not sacrificing U.S. security. So the Iranians had been wreaking havoc against Americans pretty much since 1980. There's a trail of blood. They've killed thousands of Americans. President Trump put an end to that. The second they hurt one American, he killed the terrorist mastermind Qasem Soleimani. He took out the Islamic Caliphate, ISIS's, all the ground they held without getting us into any new wars. He also did something absolutely amazing economically here in America, is he had working class wages start to rise from 2017 till right before COVID. He did that because he used protectionist trade policies to bring manufacturing back home and to stop the importing of cheap Chinese goods into the American economy. So by President Trump trying to rebuild our manufacturing base, he gave working class Americans an actual shot at upward mobility. And that's a shot that they hadn't had in a very long time. Pretty much in my lifetime, we hadn't had that. So the people on the right wing and the left wing before Trump, they said, hey, it's impossible to have all these working class jobs come back and for working class wages to rise. Trump made that happen by putting the country first. He didn't bow down to the altar of all free trade all the time. He offensively used the power of our government and our economy, our ability to tariff, our ability to give tax breaks where tax breaks were required. to benefit the working class American people. And I think that's something that we need to bring back. Same thing with the border and all the immigration policies.
Since you live so close to Portland, you said Portland was your hometown. What can you tell people, other than from the limited images they've seen, about the reality of Antifa there and in the Pacific Northwest in general?
Yeah, and Antifa is very dangerous, and they have been left unchecked for far so long. They're beginning to expand outside the Pacific Northwest. The Pacific Northwest is where they have all their sanctuary. If you go to Portland right now, it's very sad what's happened. Same thing with Seattle. There's entire sections of the city where most of the commerce, most of the business used to happen that have been more or less completely shut down. They're boarded up. It looks like a hurricane just went through there. There's rampant homelessness and lawlessness. Occasionally, Antifa sets up checkpoints. This is stuff that I used to see overseas in war zones, not in America. Look, the bottom line is we have to have law and order. We have to have local government that will actually stand up to these thugs. And if local government won't, that's where the federal government actually has to come in. The FBI and the DOJ need to stop hunting for grandmothers and MAGA hats that were near the Capitol on January 6th and go after these terrorists that are burning our cities down.
You have a soldier's mentality because you are a soldier. Your way of doing this and your passion is to go run for Congress. What's something, as this theme of this conference is America Uncanceled, what's something the average person can do to get uncanceled? What would you suggest to those people out there watching that want to say, what do I do, Joe?
I would suggest just realize that we conservatives, we're the majority of this country. The mainstream media wants to make it seem like we're on the retreat, when really we are actually on the offensive. So get involved at whatever level that you can. The school board meetings, pushing back against critical race theory in the schools to stop that indoctrination of our children, I think is a great place where people can start to come out in numbers, because we're all deeply invested in the education and the future of our children. That's a great place to start. Get involved at your local Republican precinct. Let's take over all those precinct committee meetings. Let's get true America First conservatives in there, and then really just unplug from all the mainstream media that you possibly can. Find good outlets that are actually going to report good actual facts and support them with your dollars and your clicks.
My final question is completely non-political, but it is one as a musician. Who's your favorite musical artist of all time?
Favorite musical artist of all time? Man, I haven't been asked that.
That's what I knew I would throw you for a loop.
I'm a pretty big hard rock and heavy metal guy.
So who do you like?
Huge Iron Maiden.
Who are you listening to currently?
Huge Iron Maiden fan as far as the classics go.
Yeah.
Big Trivium fan. If you're familiar with them at all.
Yeah.
So big fans of them as well. Who else? Yeah, Trivium, Shadows Fall. Yeah.
Wow.
Ones,
Coming from Joe Kidd, running for Congress.
Yeah.
All right, Joe. Thank you so much for your time, and the best of luck to you on the race.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.